It's Design Behind the Mask with your host, Carl Waldron. This is a show about design and your favorite fandoms. First, we discuss a fancy design thing, then I give you 2 fun recommendations based on our topic. You come for the voice, you leave with a choice. Sound good? Let's start the show. Hello, my fans of fandom. It's Design Behind the Mask. I'm your host, Carl Waldron, and today we are talking about the lost art of video game manuals. If you've played, if you've purchased or were given or just had around any old games from, let's say, Super Nintendo to PlayStation 2? PlayStation 3, we'll say, is the kind of cutoff, I would say. But video game manuals were an amazing art in and of itself. They came with everything. I have a memory of watching my friend and his sister play The Legend of Zelda on Nintendo. And they had, the manual came with, I believe it was a gold manual, and it was just chock full of information, character illustrations, top to bottom. And they being my friend, his sister, and their parents, they all played Zelda together. And they took graph paper and they mapped out all of Zelda, all of the Legend of Zelda on graph paper. Just created the dungeons with pencil, marked where the items were, ended up taping other pieces of paper so that they can continue the map, and they ended up folding this makeshift map up and sticking it in the manual. And it was such a beautiful, unique piece of art that they created that they then stuffed into another piece of art. Those manuals used to come with their own maps, cloth maps, paper maps, stuff that you can see the world that you would be exploring in this, either isometric or pixelated game or whatever. These beautifully drawn maps or character descriptions. One of my favorite manuals was the Final Fantasy VII manual. One of my favorite games of all time. Thick manual. And here's a as Freddie Prinze would say from his wrestling podcast, here's a side quest. I'm not gonna steal it, but I'm just gonna use that right now. Here's a side quest. When Final Fantasy VII came out, I was in, I'm gonna say 8th grade, maybe 7th grade, 8th grade. I think it was 8th grade. Can't be sure. I believe I was gonna take the SATs, so I think it was 8th grade. But it came out in Japan, and it was nowhere to be found near me. I had a buddy, his name was Londell. Shout out Londell. He had a hookup somewhere, don't know where. He told me, he's like, yeah, I bought Final Fantasy VII. I said, what? Can you get another one? He said, of course. He said, give me the money, I'll go get it, and I'll bring it to you on Friday. This was like on a Wednesday or something. This was before Cash App. This was before Venmo. This was before any of us had a working cell phone, honestly. I mean, I think I had a cell phone, but he didn't. So I had no way to get in touch with him other than school. And my little naive ass handed over, no joke, $80 to this guy. I mean, granted, I knew him, but still, you just hand $80 to just some dude who says, yeah, I got I can get you Final Fantasy VII with no proof. This is trust. This is trust in a friend and naivete meeting at an intersection and making sweet love together. Because the game, I believe the game was, it wasn't the regular $49.99. I believe it was $60-something because it was an import. And obviously I said, is it English? He said, yes, it's the English version. Stupid little me handed over all this money that I had been saving up. And Friday comes, and Londell, shout out Londell, came to school, dropped his bag on the desk, on my desk, cracks it open, pulls out a brown paper bag, looks around, hands it to me, zips up his bag, walks away. I take the bag, I put it inside of my book bag because, again, we're not supposed to have games or toys or anything in school. I put the bag in my bag and I open it up, and whoa, there it was. Final Fantasy VII. What a beautiful sight. I got home that night, went through the motions, eating dinner. My mother was watching the news, so I didn't have the TV. Once my mother retired to the bedroom to go, whatever, watch more news. That's all my mother ever did, was watch the news. She went to the bedroom, watched the news. I cracked open that plastic, and this, I don't believe this was the first time I did it, but it was certainly a ritual of mine. I would stop myself from playing the game. I would read the manual first. Now, I don't know if I was weirdly like a little kid just edging myself, if that's a term I was refusing to play the game until I read the manual, as if to build anticipation for the game. But as I was reading the Final Fantasy VII manual, I was enjoying myself. I was like, this is a good manual. It was full color. It had full bios for all the characters, so I got to know the characters before I even saw them in the game. It had a breakdown of the systems in the game, the controls, the actual story, what Midgar looked like, all this crazy stuff. I know I'm forgetting a ton, but it was a great manual, and it only enhanced the experience. To this day, Final Fantasy VII is maybe number 2 on my favorite games of all time, and I think number 1 is Final Fantasy Tactics. We can get into that in another episode. But there was a precedent with video game manuals. They were supposed to be like these really thick companion pieces to the game. Before the internet was a thing and you can kind of look up guides and control schemes and strategies and all this stuff online, video game manuals were kind of your only shot to get, good. That, or calling Nintendo Power for tips, or I don't know. I mean, the internet was around. I'm not saying it wasn't. GameFAQs was a thing. But the manual was your first stop to understanding the game, and developers knew this, so they added all this extra stuff. They put a lot of time and love into these manuals. I have a set behind me that I was going to write an article about, but now I'm just going to do this podcast. I mean, I'm still going to write the article, but I'm just going to do the episode about it. Over the years, I guess the advent of the internet kind of taking off with video games, and then the cost of production, which can be high when you're designing these, millions and millions of books, or printing these millions and millions of books. They started cutting back on, I would assume, unnecessary costs, unnecessary expenditures, which would be printing 50-page manuals for video games. And then it got to the point where they didn't print them at all. Smash cut to now, and if you purchase a PlayStation 5 or Xbox game, doesn't, I would say maybe 1% or less comes with an actual manual. I think they have the obligatory, here are the controls, and this is how you turn on your TV. But they long gone are the elaborate branded books that used to come with them. And I think back to games like Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, which had, or any of the Grand Theft Autos, Grand Theft Auto 3, San Andreas, Grand Theft Auto 4, what was the Vice City? They were all thick manuals, and they were themed to the world of GTA. And they're still, to this day, some of the best manuals created for video games, because they had breakdowns of the city that you were going to play in. You got to learn local locations, so they told you, here's where you can get ammunition, because GTA is the horror show. Here's where you can go to a strip club, or here's where you can find a certain NPC, all within the manual, within the context of like a travel guide for the city. So Vice City was supposed to be Miami, so it's all, saturated in pastel neon colors, and talking about the strip and kind of where to rent a boat, or all this crazy stuff. And then then they had the obligatory, what's the word I'm looking for? They had a map. Forget the word I was looking for. They had a giant flippin' map of whatever city you were in, and it was well thought out. It was basically just a reproduction of the map that's actually in the game, but you can, if you were so inclined, tape it to your wall and then mark out places you wanted to go, if that's the type of person you are. But I would assume a lot of gamers like myself just used it as like swag. We got free swag. Got a friggin' map of the whole game. I never did anything with it because, again, I didn't have a place to hang stuff in my old apartment. And now that I'm older, I wouldn't hang a map of a video game on my wall unless it was like framed or drawn really well, or I don't know. I'm almost walking back my. Would I put a map of a video game city up on my wall? I think I'd put a map of like Breath of the Wild, but not a GTA map. Anyway, we were given free swag with these games, just crazy thick manuals with these. I remember the Smash Brothers manual had illustrations of the moves, like it had the actual button combinations, and next to it there was like an illustration of what it would look like after you executed the move. That's amazing. So that the amount of art assets you had to create just for that, because it wasn't a sprite from within the game, it was an illustration of Mario doing an uppercut or something. The detail that went into something like that is astounding, and it's a shame that it's gone, and I don't know if it will ever come back. Some games do put out larger manuals that are more involved. Games like The Witcher kind of have to, because that game is confusing on consoles. But in the age of digital games and trying to cut back cost to just get the game to people, it doesn't seem like we'll ever get back to that golden age of elaborate, beautifully designed, wonderfully typed out manuals that you can save. No, I think those days are gone, and that's a shame, because they weren't the best part of gaming, but they were definitely a one-up, a prize, right? As I got older, I ran out of space. You can't really keep video games just in their boxes everywhere. The same way I stopped collecting comics, which I'm starting again. I couldn't collect physical video games anymore. It was just taking up way too much space. To this day, I still have video games sitting in my mother's house on a shelf, the same place I had them when I was younger. It's been over 12 years since I left the house. 13 years. Why do I still have games there? But just they take up so much space, all these cases. So, that being said, I ended up buying one of those CD sleeve cases and just breaking down all of my video game cases. So I just took all the games out, put them in these sleeves, and like, it was a sad time just cracking these open and figuring out which manuals I wanted to keep and which video game covers I wanted to keep. I systematically went through and say which one of these has the best art, and I'm going to keep them and do something with them. I don't know what, but I'm going to keep them. Someone took the time to draw this out, and then someone else took the time to design this cover or this manual, and I'm going to honor that. The plastic, yes, someone else created the plastic, but I can't do anything with it. It's taking up too much space, but I can do something with the art. So I now have a stack of manuals and cover art just kind of not floating around, but they're just in a case somewhere waiting for me to decide what to do with them. So if anyone has a suggestion of what I should do with all these old game covers and manuals, you let me know. I'm open to all suggestions. Maybe make a quilt out of them. Can't make a quilt out of them. Maybe plaster my son's room with them. It might terrify him in the middle of the night. I don't know. I'm open to ideas. I'm not gonna. I mean, at the least I can do is scrapbook it, but where's the fun in that? All right, we're on the backside of the podcast, y'all, and I'm gonna be honest. I don't particularly have a recommendation for this one in terms of fandom, but the working recommendation was to go through your old games and pick out your favorite manuals and preserve them. Whether that be scanning the interiors of the manuals and finding your best page and posting that somewhere, or just having them, just if you're a collector of games and you have them, of course, leave them in the case and continue to own the case and appreciate what's in there. But if you're like me and you couldn't justify keeping them, or you didn't have a place for them, or you didn't have room, preserve those pieces of gaming history. I don't know if there are files out there saved up on some hard drive somewhere, but I would love a file of like the old Zelda manual or one of the GTAs. GTA is probably easier to get. The old Zelda manual is probably trapped in Nintendo's warehouse somewhere, like the Ark of the Covenant. But yeah, if I can find like a digital asset of some of those old school manuals, that'd be great. So yeah, that's the fandom recommendation. For design, it's kind of actually, it's a lazy one, so I'm not even going to say it. It's also a lazy, expensive one. Yeah, I'm going to skip the design recommendation. Yeah, go preserve some manuals. And if you want, this is more homework than anything. Take a game that doesn't have a well-designed manual and redesign it and post it. There's a portfolio piece for you, either established designers or upcoming designers. We'll do the same. We'll pick a game that, we've purchased and didn't have a manual and should have, and we'll design one. That's it. Those are the recommendations. Some homework, and they're basically homework. You can't do anything with them, but you can certainly appreciate them. That's all for this episode of Design Behind the Mask. Thank you for spending your precious little time with me. I appreciate you. And I will talk to you. I'm not going to see you. I'm going to talk to you next time.